So we're here again, trying to get the entire picture of the story of Rebby Chanina here on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis. And just to summarize, we have a question which still remains unanswered. In the case of Ben Noach Shabirach Hashem v'Nizgayer, Rebby Chanina says Potur, and we're not sure why. And we're trying to figure out this concept of Ishtani Dina and Ishtani Misa. As a Ben Noach, he would have been condemned with one judge, one witness, without a hasra, whereas as a Yisrael, for the same criminal act, he would have been condemned in a court of 23 judges, with a hasra, with 2 edim minimum, and the Ishtani Misa. As a Ben Noach, he's chayiv sayiv. As the Yisrael, for the same avera, he's chayiv a much more severe death penalty, which is called skila. And according to Rebby Chanina, he doesn't fit into either category, neither sayiv nor skila. We understood intuitively why he's not chayiv skila, because he didn't perpetrate this crime after his gerus. Why should he get a more severe punishment of skila for that which he perpetrated as a Ben Noach, which would have only engendered a condemnation and a chiyuv of sayif, which is a lower kind of punishment, the more kal, vis-a-vis skila, which is more chamor. But we weren't absolutely sure and clear why we can't put him to death with sayif. And here's where Rebby Chanina employs or activates the principle of Ishtani Dina, Ishtani Misa. And therefore, since now today, had he perpetrated the crime, he would be chayiv a different Misa. Therefore, we cannot condemn him and implement that penalty of sayif. We were tempted to believe that in the choice between the punishment, as it were, had he been condemned when he perpetrated the crime, and the punishment of today, had he perpetrated the crime today, it would seem more logical that he should get the punishment of the moment that he did the Avera, which is called Kedina de Meikara. Meikara meaning originally when he committed the crime. However, we seem to be contradicting that principle and tipping the scale in favor of meting out the punishment of today, which is called Dina Dahashta. And that from the case, which if you still have your charts, we'll add in Roman numeral number 4, and that's going to be Yisrael Sheba al Nara Hamurosa V'nis Bagra. He had a relationship with a married woman who was a Nara, and that would incur a chiyuv skila. And now, before we got to condemn him, she became a bogeres. Had he perpetrated the crime today, he would be chayiv chenek. Because today she's a bogeres. And the Gemara, at least initially before of Yochanan, will tip the scale in favor of what we call hashta. One second, in favor of, one second. Again, she would have been chayav skila. Yeah, hashta. Hashta means we're going to give him the punishment of now. and that is chenek. So again, this is a case of Ishtani Misa, V'lo Ishtani Dina. We're going to mete out the punishment of Hashta. And the Gemara says, why don't we give him skila? Because that's when he perpetrated the crime. And the Gemara answers, Hoil Ishtane Ishtane. And this is going to support Rebby Chanina. But we said, according to Rebby Chanina, in the toss-up between Meikara and Hashta, we would tip the scale in favor of Meikara to give him the punishment that he would have suffered and be condemned for if he would have done it, if we would have actually condemned him at the time that he did the crime. And that's called Meikara. But the Gemara is assuming that whole Vishnei Ishnei, and therefore we should give him the Misa of Hashta. And that would shed a whole different light on Ben Noach Shabir Chas Hashem and his Gayer. We should really be punishing him as if he perpetrated the crime today as a ger, which would incur a chiv skila, which is chamur, but we can't do so for like a technical reason. So it's not the way we wanted to say it, and that's the way we were pitching the ball yesterday, that we should go back to Meikara, to the Shas Avera, and see if we can condemn him for perpetrating the crime as he did it, the Shas Ben Noach, Yosef Ben Noach. Here, in the case of Yisrael Aval Nara Murasov and his Bagra, the Gemara seems to be going in the opposite direction, that whole Vishnei Ishnei would lead me to want to give and mete out the punishment of Hashta, not the punishment of Meikara. Is that clear? At least if the problem is clear, that itself is Revach. So let me take a little break here and ask, turn on your mics or whatever it is, and just tell me if what I said is clear, whether I should repeat myself, whether you have any comments, criticism.
I'm okay.
And Ruven, what do you say? Are you with me? I mean, I know you probably have to pack soon, but for the time being. One second, we'll.
Just once again, before, as a Ben Noach, if he builds a Bageret, he's culpable for skila. I thought it was Henek.
Oh, you're talking about Ben Noach Shabir Chas Hashem? So he should be getting Sayed.
Oh, that's Sarah. Okay. Sarah. But what is the case when it's the same?
That's going to be the case of Ben Noach Shehika Es Yisrael, of Ben Noach who killed the Jew,
right? And
then he was misguided. So in that case, no matter how you slice the cake, he's chayav sayif. As a goy, he'd be chayav sayif, and as a Yisrael, he'd be chayav sayif. So that's a case of lo ishtana dina, lo ishtana misaso, and therefore even Reb Chanina would agree that we'll mete out the punishment of sayif, because no matter how you slice the cake, whether you're going meikara or whether you're going hashta, it's always the identical misa of sayif.
And then there's a case where is that Henek is the punishment in both cases as well.
Are you talking about the case of Ben Noach Shabal Eishes Ish?
Right. So that's Henek in both cases.
So there we applied the principle of Kala B'Chamura Meshach Shayach, and therefore, since as a Ben Noach, he would be Chayiv Sayev for that relationship. Now, after he becomes a Yisrael, if he perpetrated the same crime, he would get a lighter punishment of Chenek, And therefore, the Gemara says, in that case, based on the Brisa, he's going to be chayav chenek, which means he's going to get the lesser of the two punishments. And the Gemara thinks that according to Rebby Chanina, he should be completely potter, because this is not only nishtana dina, but also nishtana misaso. But the Gemara says that even Rebby Chanina will agree in this case that we're going to treat it as if lo nishtana misaso, because sayif includes within it chenek.
Right.
And that's called kala b'chamura meshach shaykh.
Oh, that's kind of.
But my question to you is, are you on board with me that there seems to be a problem in this sugya in terms of whether or not we go back to Meikara or we give him the punishment of Hashta? Our impression was that in the case of a Ben Noach Shabirach as Hashem and his Gayer, fundamentally we should be giving him the punishment of Meikara, because that's when he perpetrated the crime. We have a technical problem because Nishtana Misaso, and today he'd be Chayav Skila instead of Sayif. So we can't put him to death by Sayif. But really, if it weren't for the fact that it was Nishtana Misaso, we would have given him the Misa Meikara at the shot that he incurred at the Shas Avera, and that would be Sayif. And therefore, again, this is only a theoretical, conceptual comment that I'm going to make. In a Ben Noach Shehikas Yisrael, we're going to give him Sayif because that would have been the punishment that we would have meted out to him as a Ben Noach. And again, going Meikara. Again, there's no nafkamina here because since now Midahash it's also Sayif, and they're two identical misos, the same miso, and therefore it's no Ishtana Misoso. That's why he gets that miso. I mean, Rebby Chanina was only talking about a case of Nishtana Misoso, but in Nishtana Misoso, which direction would he logically want to go to if not for this new principle of Nishtana Misoso? What would be the Havamina? And I think the Havamina would have been that we go back Meikara to the moment that he perpetrated the crime, and therefore fundamentally should be Chayiv Sayiv. But because of Nishtana Dino, Nishtana Misoso, we cannot implement the punishment of Sayiv. Because today we'd be judging him with a whole different set of rules and regulations, and we would be condemning him for a different kind of Misa. So that's why we can't go back. We're straitjacketed. We can't go back to the moment of his crime, and therefore today, after he became a ger, condemn him for the same punishment that he would have gotten if we would have condemned him at the time of the Aver. The opposite conclusion seems to be indicated by the Gemara in the case of Yisrael Shabal Nara Murasav in his Bagra, and the Gemara says Tido Mechenik, meaning instead of giving her the Misa, giving him the Misa that he should have incurred had he been condemned before she became a Bogeris, namely the Misa of Skila, we're going to instead mete out the Misa of Chenek as she would have it today, and that seems to be indicative of the fact that Tidon Kidahashta, not Kidameikar. That's where we got stuck with what seems to be a contradiction. Now, in the case of Yisrael Abba Nara Murasav in his Bagra, you could possibly say that, look, Rebby Chanina, in this case, would agree that he has to get one Misa or the other. And the reason for that is because Lo Ishtana Dina. So in a case where there's no element of Ishtana Dina, and is only an element of Ishtana Misaso, then we'll give him the lesser of the two misos. In the case of Enoch Shabiris Hashem and his guy, we have both Nishtana Dino and nishtana misaso, and that's why he's potter, he's off the hook. But if we would have just isolated the nishtana misaso, then we would choose the misa kala of the two, which would be in this case sayif instead of skila. So that's the possible Pesach, that opens up a resolution to this contradiction. And I'll say it one more time. That the principle of Nishtana Hov Ishtane Ishtane that was formulated and originated by Rebby Chanina would not apply in the case where the din is the same din. They would always have to judge this Yisrael Shabal and Nara with the same two Eidim in front of the identical judge, court of 23 judges with Asra, etc. So there's no Ishtani Dina. And now we have a problem with Ishtana Misa, and Rebby Chanina would be open-minded about that as to which of the two Misas we should meet out. And the bottom line is, let's take the lesser of the two misos. So that if, as a Nara, she would generate a chiv skilo, which is more chamur, and as a bogeres only chenek, which is kala, we're going to give him the lesser of the two severe misos, namely, we'll give him chenek. Okay, now this leads us to Tosfos Divra Maskil Tala. So again, if we look at our chart and we plug in the Divra Maskil of Tosfos Tala B'Chamura Meshech Shaycha, we're talking about the case of Ben Noach Sheba Al Bas Al Eshes Yisrael. And that would have incurred a chiyuv of sayif. Now he became a ger, and that would incur a lighter misa sentence of chenek, and we're going to give him the lighter misa. And why? And the Gemara is saying because kala b'chamura meshech shaycha, as if to say that the misa of sayif includes within it the misa of chenek. So it sounds like we're really giving the misa of chenek in this case. Again, it's not going to be in the form of chenek; it'll be in the form of sayif, but it is a kiyum of chenek. It's almost as if we're trying to win the game from both sides, meaning we want to go back to Meikara and put him to death with Sayif. We want to go to Hashta and put him to death with Chenek. And the final conclusion seems to be that we go back to Meikara. As I call it, no. Are we going back to Meikara? If we're saying Kala b'chamura meshach shaycha, then we're really giving the Misa Kala. Let's read the Tosfos. Chenek shehi Misa Kala. Hayaroylo mitchila. So mitchila is the Hebrew counterpart to Meikara. We call it Meikara, he calls it mitchila. But not only that, v'yosef. In other words, Meikara, he should have incurred a chiyuv sayif, which is more than chenek. Let me just adjust this for a second, if you don't mind. I shouldn't play around with this microphone because I could mess things up really bad, but okay, we'll try. So in the case of Benoach Sheba al Eshes Yisrael, and we're going to mete out the punishment of chenek. So the Gemara sees this as an objection, as a contradiction to Rabbi Chanina, because since Ishtani Misaso, he should be potter. But the Gemara's answer in defense of Rabbi Chanina is that here it's a unique, exceptional kind of case in which the Misa goes down a level from a kar to hashta as a result of his gerus, going from sayif down to chenek. And that's the exact flip case of the original statement of Rabbi Chanina in the original scenario, Benoach Shabir Hashem and his Gaia, where we went from a Misa Kala to a Misa Chamura. So it seems that when we go from a Misa Kala down to a Misa Chamura, up to a Misa Chamura, then Rabbi Chanina is going to say, Potter. We can't give you the Misa Kala because today you would be judged and condemned to a Misa Chamura. We can't give you the Misa Chamura because when you perpetrated the crime, you were not chayav that Misa Chamura. But what happens in a case where the original Misa would have been more chamur than the Misa of Hashta? The Gemara, the Havamina thought that case, that the din in that case would be potter like Rabbi Chanina's original case, because in the Shtana Misaso, and the Gemara answers no. If you're going from as a guy, may kara a harsher punishment, and now you're going down to the hashta after his gerus as a Misa Kala, then in this case, Rabbi Chanina is not going to rule potter, but rather we're going to give him the Misa Kala. So when he has this relationship with an Eshes Yisrael as a guy, he'd be chayav sayiv, which is more chomer. Now, had he perpetrated the same crime after gerus, he would be chayav a Misa Kala, and we're going to beat out the Misa Kala. And if I'm not mistaken, Tosa says the chenek shehi misa kala. So chenek is kal vis-a-vis sayif. Hayaroi lo mitchila. And as I said before, the word mitchila is identical with the word meikara. And the Af Yosef. He's worthy of chenek and even more than chenek, meaning sayif. So maybe what the Gemara is saying here is that the chenek element of sayif is what we're going to be meeting out to him, because it's similar to the case of Benoach Shehikas Yisrael, which means that no matter how you slice the cake, whether you go back to his status as Benoach or we judge him now as Yisrael, he would always be chayv the same identical misa of sayif. And now the Gemara is telling me that if you're going from sayif down to chenek, then since chenek is included on the sayif, we're basically in a situation where the misa is identical. We can subtract from the sayif the element of chenek, and then we have meikara, chenek, and hashta chenek. And we've already established that Rabbi Chanina would agree that if lo nishtana misa, then we're going to give him that misa, like in the case of Benoach Shehargas Yisrael. And here also, when Benoach is Baal Eishes Yisrael, then it's Meikara and Hashta, the same identical misa, even though again it fools you at the surface level because it seems like Sayif is different than Chenek, but we're saying now that Kal B'Chamura Meshach Shaykh, and therefore Chenek is included in Sayif, or to say it the other way around, Sayif includes also Chenek, and therefore it's like a situation of Meikara, Chenek, V'Hashta Chenek. Even though again, Meikara he behind Sayif, but included in that Sayif is Chenek. And you cannot apply that reasoning in the case of Benoach Shabir Hashem, because you're going from a Misa Kala up to a Misa Chamura. But again, we have to inject or introduce the principle of Ishtane Misasa, because Rabbi Chanina says you're potter, even though Mimanav Shokti B'Chayav Misa. Why not give him the Misa of Sayif? Do we have an answer to that question? Why doesn't Rabbi Chanina agree that in the case of Benoach Shabir Hashem, he should get Sayif? You tell me now he would be condemned to a different Misa, but in the case of Benoach Shabal Eishes Ish Yisrael, it's not a different Misa because we're condemning him for Chenek. And Sayif itself contains within it Chenek. So why would Rebby Chanina object to meeting out the punishment of Sayed in the case of Ben Noach Shabirach es Hashem? He tells because he would be judged today there, and he would get skila. And in the case of Chenek of Eishes Yisrael, he's actually getting Sayed, or he's getting the Chenek dimension of Sayed. Again, what were we asking? Why not give him Sayed? And skila has within it Sayed. Skila has within it Sayed. What are you telling me? You can't judge him today for Sayed because he's Yisrael after Gerus, and he would have been condemned for skila. Okay, why not extract Sayed from skila, because skila is more chavel? Well, what's your problem here? What's the objection to imposing the visa of Sayed on this Ben Noach Shabirach es Hashem and this guy? You're saying, how could I judge him for Sayed when he's Yisrael now and he deserves a more severe punishment of skila? But the answer to that is that included within skila is Sayed. But what's the objection of, what's the problem with giving him Sayed? Okay, today we give him skila. Okay, fine. It sounds like there's some sort of halacha that we cannot implement today, kidahashta, a lesser punishment than what he would deserve if he committed the crime today. So by letting him off the hook with Sayed, when today if he was mevarach Hashem b'chayv skila, that we can't do. We can't let him off the hook. But if, in the case of Ben Noach Shabal Eishes Yisrael, we're going to give him chenek, then Mimon Shach, that would be an acceptable condemnation. So I think what we're saying is that according to Reb Chanina, we must mete out a punishment which would be acceptable, Mimon Shach, whether or not b'dahashta or b'dikara. And kala b'chamura meshach shaycha means that we are implementing the misa that he would have been worthy of meikara, because included on the sayif is chenek. But again, then you're going to ask me, well, in Benoch Shabal Eishis Yisri, if you say you have to give a misa that would satisfy both, so then Meikara he would have been Chayav Sayev. How could Chenek satisfy Sayev? So if you're saying that included in Saif is Chenek, then why can't you say included in Skila is Saif? That's what I don't understand. You want to satisfy both Meikar Midahashta. And a Benoach Midahashta is Chayav Skila, which is more common than Saif, but why not say that we are implementing that misa of skila, at least as far as the saif element of skila, which is exactly what we're saying here in Benoch Shabal Ish Yisrael, that by meeting out chenek, we are fulfilling the condemnation of saif, at least as far as the chenek element is concerned. And therefore we have the same misa for both. And we'll give chenek. Why not say the same thing in Beinoach Shabirchas Hashem and his Gayer, that if we were to implement Saif, then even though today he be Chayiv Skila, but we're giving him the Saif element of Skila. Any insights? Where am I going wrong over here? You know, did I make some sort of calculatory error? The reason I say this is because at this point Tosfos is gonna go on to Roman numeral number 4, which is the case of Yisrael Abba al Nara Marasa, which Gemara quotes as a proof text to support Rebby Chanina. But I'm stuck with trying to understand the Gemara's answer to reconcile the apparent stira from this brisa to Rebby Chanina. Let me go back for a minute to the Gemara. The Gemara says, Ella, Kala b'chamura meshach shayach. I'll read to you the commentary here of the Masechet. He says, Hamisa chamura koleles es hamisa kala. Kloma. Benoch shabal eishes ish Yisrael dino b'sayit. Ilu bal eishes ish liachash and his gayo dino b'chenek she misa kala yosem misayev. Nimtza shamisa hamura, which we said was sayev, shu chayev biyoso goy, koleles es hamisa kala shechayev ata, and therefore we can mete out the punishment of chenek because the misa hamura of sayev includes within it the misa kala of chenek. Yefshal lomar shebiyoso goy hayaroi gam lemisas chenek plus vi'af למisa chamura misa. ואין זה נחשב לשינוי מיסה. לכן נהרג עתה בחנק שהיא מיסה קלה. Maybe here's the punchline. Let's see. Avol mevarches Hashem. Shaliachar she's gayer dino b'misa skila chamura. We also goy dino b'misa asayef akala. Below ayoroy l'misa skila hachamura. Zenech shel l'shinu misa v'lechein potur. He says, Lo ayoroy l'misa skila chamura. I understand that. So why not just give him the misa kala of Sayed? And included in skila is Sayed. And again, ein ze nechshav l'shinu misa. So I don't see that the Masifta is really solving my problem. Even though he's convinced that it's simple. I mean, he says, Avol mevarach Hashem. That's a different story because he should be chayv misa chamura. So again, it seems that Kala b'chamura Meshech Shaicha only goes in one direction. Let's try going it this way. We have to give him the Misa Meikara. If the Misa Meikara is Chamura, then by giving him the Kala, we are also fulfilling the Misa Meikara. But in the case when we go from Kala to Chamura, why not say Meikara? Why does the Misas Hashta Chamura make it impossible to implement the Misa to Meikara? Let's try it the other way and see if it works. I don't know. We should really give him the Misa Dahashta, which I don't understand why. But the problem with giving him the Misa of Dahashta, And we went from what to what? We went from Chomor to Kal in the case of Baal Eishes Yisrael. We really want to give him the Misa Dahashta. The only problem is that when he perpetrated the crime, he would have gotten a more Chomor. So now we're saying that, you know what? Don't be bothered and straitjacketed by the fact that he deserves, from the perspective of Midikara, a more severe punishment, because we're going to give him a Dahashta, and we already have, like, we touch base even with the Meikara. Why? Because included on the Sayef is Chen. Okay, let's take the case of Benoach Shabir Hashem. If we want to give him a Hashta, then he should get Skila. So when you want to fulfill what I call the touch base with the Misa Demei Kara, then you could apply the principle of Kala B'Chamura Meshach Shaykh, and included on the Sayef, which is the Misa Demei Kara, is Chenek. So again, fundamentally, we want to apply the Misa of Hashta. We are straitjacketed by the fact that there's a different Misa for the Meikara, but it doesn't matter. Why? Because we can still fulfill the mitzvah, I say the Misa of Hashta, without upsetting the Misa Meikara, because the Misa Meikara also includes within it Chenek, which is the Misa Kala, so we're okay. But in a case where the Misa Dash is more chomer than a Misa Meikara, then you got to give him the Misa Chamur of Hasht. And if you don't, then he's off the hook. That seems to work. I mean, again, it's not necessarily intuitively logical, but it seems to work as a mechanical rule. We must give him the Misa Dahash. The problem with Ben Noach Shabirachas Hashem is that we have a barrier. The barrier is, how can you give him a more Chomer Dika Misa than the Misa that he would have been worthy of had he been judged and condemned at the time that he perpetrated the crime? So that's like a technical foul, a barrier that prevents us from implementing the Misa Dahash. In the case of Baal Eishes Ish, when we want to implement the Misa Dahashta, we have no problem, because that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to give him Chenek, and that was the Misa Dahashta. So what are you going to say? Well, 1 second. You're going to tell me that what? Oh, so what are you going to tell me? That you can't give him the Misa Meikara because you don't fulfill the Misa Dahashta. So in other words, in the case of Birch Hashem, Sayef is not an option because we must fulfill Misa Dahashta. And Sayef is not a fulfillment of the Misa Dahashta of Skil. However, in the case of Baal Eishes Yisrael, there we can fulfill the Misa Dahashta. That's exactly what we're doing. And if you'll argue, but wait a second, aren't you going beyond what he deserves? Which was the reason why we couldn't implement the Misa Dahashta of Skila in the case of Birch Hashem, because you're going beyond what he deserves? The answer is no. He, in the case of Eishes Ish, deserved Sayev. We're giving him Chenek. And Chenek is included on the side. Saif includes Chenek. So we are not in any way upsetting, we're not ruffling the feathers of the Meikara. Because we have this principle of Kala b'kamura meshach shaycha, and we're touching base with the Misa de Meikara. However, in a case where we will fulfill Misa de Hashta in such a way that we're going beyond the Misa de Meikara, that's already a technical foul. That's already not acceptable. We cannot go beyond what he would have deserved had he been condemned at the time of the crime. Does it work? And I think if we go with this approach, then we'll do a lot better with Yisrael Shabal Nara Hamurasim and his Bagra, because we're going to beat out the punishment of Chenek, which is the Misa da Hashta. And once again, in the Meikara, when he perpetrated the crime when she was a Nara, he would have been worthy of Skila, but Skila includes within it Chenek. So when we beat out the punishment of Chenek, we are covering our bases, so to speak, as far as the Meikara situation is, and we're not beating out a punishment which is more chomer than the Misa de Meikara, which would be absolutely unacceptable. In fact, that's why in Birachas Hashem, Rebby Chanina was Makadesh when he was Makadesh, that we cannot implement Skila, which had he implemented the crime of Birachas Hashem now as a ger, he would have been Chayiv Skila, because then we're ruffling the feathers as far as the Meikara, we're going beyond what he would have deserved at the time that he perpetrated the crime. In the case of Baal Eishes Ish Yisrael, by giving him Chenek, we're not going beyond the Misa de Meikara, we are implementing the Misa de Hashta. I think it works. Again, I'm not sure that I understand the philosophy behind it, but I think mechanically it works. So let's see the Tosfos now. How are we doing on the clock? Let me just see. We'll take it for another 2-3 minutes, and then that's it. So Tosfos says that Chenek shehi misa kala roylo mitchila. So if you're worried about the fact that Meikara, he would have been chayav sayid in the case of Eishes Ish, so you know what? We're going to implement the Misa da Hashta of Chenek, and we're not upsetting in any way the Misa de Meikara of Sayef, which includes within it Chenek. And now Tosfos asks the following question. And we're holding now Nidones Bechenek Uka Omar Beskila my time low. Why don't we give Skila? Kevin the Ishtane. So Tosfos doesn't understand why the Gemara is bothered by this question. The Gemara should have seen this as a consistent application of the principle of Kala b'chamura meshach shayek, because we're giving him chenek. So one second. Sorry. One second. No, the Gemara is quoting Nara Maras as support for Rebby Chanina. So what's bothering Tosfos? in the Samach circle, so Bogra, come over Skila, my time low. Why don't we meet out Skila, which would have been the punishment for what? For Meikaras and Nara. My time low. That if we go back to the time of the Aver Meikara, he would have been Chayav Skila. And the Gemara answers, and this is supposed to support Rebby Chanina, Kavan de Ishtene Ishtene. Which I think means Kala b'Chamura Meishach Shaykh. He writes here in the Masechet Sanhedrin Kosher, the Hamrinon Hashta the Kala b'Chamura Meishach Shaykh below Mikri Shinui and came Mad Shedina Akshav b'Chenek Shu Kal Miskila lo Mikri Shinui V'Mai Karli Ishtene. So Tosfos is objecting to the language of the Gemara. Right? The Gemara says, where is it? Skila, my time low. Where is it? Here it is. Skila, my time low. Right? If we go back Meikara, he would be Chayav Skila. And now the Gemara wants to say that this would support Rabbi Chanina. Why? Mishum the whole Ishtene Ishtene. The Tosfos is objecting to the language of the Gemara. Why does it say whole Ishtene Ishtene? Really, the reason why we're giving her Chenek is because of the din of Hashta. And now as a Bogeres, the condemnation would have been Chenek. And if you'll argue that doesn't do justice to the moment that he perpetrated the crime as a Nara, the answer is that Kal v'Chamura Mishna Shai. We're going down a level. If we're going down a level to a more Kaladic of Chenek, as opposed to Skila, then that's okay. We're not upsetting the main Kara. But Tosfos is bothered by the language of the Gemara, not the logic of the Gemara, but the language of the Gemara, the whole Ishtene Ishtene, applying the principle of Rebby Chanina. Kevan shehishtana gufa minaris lebagus shasam misa miskila chenek. V'lachein ein la misa b'skila ela b'misas chenek shechayeves ba ata. Ata means hashta. The kolshkein hacha. How much more so by the case of Benoch Shabir Hashem is Gayer, Dishtani Legamr. And therefore we should apply the principle of Hashta exactly as we did in the case of Hisbagra, and we should give Skila. But we can't give him Skila because if we go back to the Maisa that he perpetrated, then he did not deserve Skila. That's too chum. So everything seems to work out. But I think what's bothering Tosfos is the language of the Gemara. Which in the past that meant that the Misa changed. Lava Misa Koi. Because again, according to Tosfos, if we apply the principle of Kala v'Chamura Meshach Shaycha, then it's identical. The Misa is identical. It's the same Misa. So that's not Hol v'Ishtene Ishtene. Because it's the same identical Misa. That's what bothers Tosfos. Okay, then at least we understand the kasha Tosfos. So hopefully we can wrap this up. I hope tomorrow and finish up the Tosfos. Okay, then. So again, Ruvain, have a great trip and safe trip, and we're gonna miss you lots. I don't know what time it is on the American clock, but if you're ever around at this time, it would be in the middle of the night. Well, what time is it now in New Jersey?
Well,
It's
5 in the morning, yeah.
It's 10 to 5. Oh, no, I'm not gonna expect you. Well, if you have jet lag,
Okay.
I think Steve once did it. All right, call to.
Okay, thanks.
Bye, we'll miss
Appreciate it.